So let's inject a little evil into your life, shall we? As our guest now we have with us none other than Dawn of the Dead from the long-running death metal band Nunslaughter. Welcome to the show, Don.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be talking to you today.
So, Don, you started the band back when you were a teenager, really. So what were you thinking when you named the band Nunslaughter back then?
Well, it wasn't... I actually just had a conversation with the original guitar player about this probably maybe 2-3 months ago, and we can't remember who actually named the band, but to the best of our knowledge or what we can recall, we were at a show and we were trying to come up with a unique death metal name, and a lot of the good ones were kind of already taken. Obviously, Death was taken, and Obituary, and Massacre, and so we liked the idea that putting two words together. Morbid Angel was actually what we were thinking. Two words that don't really go together, but when you say it as a band name, it sounds awesome. So we just started down that path, just throwing out a bunch of different names, putting them together, and one or two or three of us said Nunslaughter, and we kind of all stopped laughing. We were like, yeah, that actually does sound pretty good. And that's how the band got named, but we can't remember who actually said it first.
Well, I can remember, like, back in the day, and we all thought, Nunslaughter was, like, super edgy and rebellious, because there really weren't a whole hell of a lot of bands around with a name quite like yours. And you guys had that kind of cool, brutal, kind of punky vibe to you as well, and there was still a shock factor back then. Ever run into any controversy, especially back in the early days?
Nothing real controversial. We have seen our name changed or bastardized on marquees when we've pulled up. We've seen N-U-M Slaughter. We've seen N-O-N-E Slaughter, Sun Slaughter, S-U-N. And then, but no real controversy. I mean, especially nowadays, I don't know, maybe the pendulum is swinging again, but it was edgy in 1987, 88, 89. For the past 25 plus years, it didn't seem to be an issue, and now there seems to be a tremendous amount of concern about being PC, so I don't know if our name is controversial again, maybe.
I don't think so now with all the other band names I see out there now. I think you're pretty safe, even with Nunslaughter. And during your career with the band, you've had a handful of studio albums and more demos, splits, EPs, and compilation than any band I know. Did you guys just not know how to say no, or gosh, it was like you've got so many, Don?
It kind of worked out that when I ended up hooking up with the previous drummer that was in the band, Jim Kanya or Jim Sadis, he viewed it, the approach to music very, very similar to mine, which was record and put out as much material as possible. And it just kind of worked out that every time I would try to work a deal, I was working with people in either different states or different countries, or with bands that could reach a different audience. So my approach pretty much from the beginning was global. I wanted to have people all over the world know about the band rather than work it from a local level up. I wanted to go global immediately, and so that's kind of how all the splits and 7-inches and tapes and live recordings kind of all manifested itself. Every time somebody would say, hey, do you want to do a split with my band? I'd say, sure, because I found out they're from Indonesia or Turkey or a place that we haven't reached yet. So it's kind of how that all developed.
So back when the band started as Nunslaughter around 87, the world was so different, both socially as well as technically. I mean, like in the late 80s and early 90s, it was the heyday of death metal with a fraction of bands around compared to today's, overly saturated multi-genre scene. Is there anything you miss about the good old days of metal?
It seemed like there was a lot of camaraderie, and you, through tape trading mainly, you would get to know people around the world, and you felt you had a relationship with them, and that they were going to be there tomorrow and the day after and continue to trade, and you wouldn't get ripped off or anything. Now it's kind of, it's a little easier to, I guess, have an alias or disguise yourself, so you almost don't feel like you've got that camaraderie with people all around the world, because they could be in the scene today and out of the scene tomorrow, or people are known as rip-offs and all this rigmarole around the music scene. So back then it seemed a little, even though this was all handwriting letters, there was no texting or emailing. These were just handwriting letters, but I'd look forward to getting the mail and seeing what new tapes I was getting and who's writing me from what different country. So I do miss that, but actually the newer way is pretty good. I mean, you can share your music with people all around the world without putting out a release in that country, and I think that today it just easier for band names to get around.
So the band's had its share of lineup changes, especially like in the early years, and with you yourself going from bass to just vocals, and of course losing your drummer Jim Sadis, who everyone knew and loved across the metal scene. Were lineup changes ever frustrating for you, and what is your current lineup now, Don?
Currently we have a very strong lineup. The guys have been playing together in bands before I even knew them, and our guitar player, Tormentor, he kind of cobbled them together once people started leaving or we needed replacements. He would suggest someone that he had jammed with in the past, and he already had a relationship and knew that he was going to get along with them. So he would suggest them, and sure enough, they'd show up, and they were good people and excellent musicians. So the current lineup is fantastic. Through the years, it has been very frustrating. A lot of times, people would get in the band, not quite share the vision that I or we had, which was to be an actual serious band. A lot of them were just jamming on the weekends when they didn't have to cut grass or take the kids to the dentist. I don't know. I just wanted to play music. It was tough to get those core people to that were like-minded. But now I really do think that I've got three other guys in the band that want to do the same thing that I want to do, which is write music, record, and play shows.
So let's talk about the new album, Red is the Color of Ripping Death, starting with the title.
Yeah, actually, how that came about was this was probably in about 2000. We were doing our first European tour, and Jim always liked to print his own Nunslaughter shirts because he liked to give a bunch of stuff away. Mm-hmm. So he printed up some shirts that were red, and we had them up at our merch stand. And I just recall a person coming up to Jim and saying, why red shirts? And Jim looked at him and just said, because red is the color of ripping death. Well, I started laughing because the guy looked confused. confused because he didn't understand what that meant, and basically just black and red and white. That combination just looks powerful. But anyway, so he had a black ink on a red shirt, and that's what the guy, that's what Jim ended up saying to the guy. So I had it in the back of my head for years, and we would bring it up every once in a while in conversation. We should write a song called Red is the Color of Ripping Death, and it never came to fruition. And after he passed, the guys that are in the band now had a song, had the music, and I said, you know what, it would be a really good song title is Red is the Color of Ripping Death, and it turned out to be a very good song, so we titled the album that.
So now this album features, like you mentioned, some of the music that you and Jim wrote years ago. So what was it like bringing these songs to life now, both in a musical sense as well as an emotional sense for you?
Well, that is always difficult. Jim was not only the drummer in the band, but a very good friend. So going back, listening to rehearsal tapes with his voice on it and his humor, sometimes it's a bit taxing. But I've been sitting on these were songs that we recorded either on a boombox or they even came out on other releases, but they weren't quite what we had intended it to be or envisioned. It's just that's how that recording came out. So when we were writing songs for the new album, I asked the guys if they wanted to revisit these songs because I'd like to hear them the way that they should have originally been recorded, and they agreed. And then once we started working them, we felt that they fit right in with what we were currently doing, and I'm lucky enough that they said, "Yeah, let's record these, officially and put them out." So I hope people like them.
I do, and I'm sure they will. And this is kind of a special treat for us, too, knowing this story. And this is also the first full-length you've recorded without him. Tell us a little bit about your drummer, Joe, who has been with the band for, 5 years now, and how he's fitting in.
He's doing great. Actually, originally when Joe got in the band and we were learning or teaching him the older songs, so that we could play live shows, he was. I kept having to reel him in because I wanted him to play exactly what Jim had played, and so after we got that out of the way, that we got him actually playing the drum parts just pretty close to what Jim was playing. When we started writing new songs, I was I wanted to try to reel him in, but Joe's he's a very talented drummer, and he draws on a lot of different influences. So the first couple of writing times, I tell him to make it less complex and kind of restrict him on what he was playing. And then after a year or so playing with him, I just says, I'm just going to let him do what he wants to do, and it worked out very well. He really showed me that he got a very good understanding of what Nunslaughter needed from him, and he fits in perfectly with the rest of the lineup.
So tell us about this album, Don. What are the subject matters? Although with Nunslaughter, I'm sure most of us can figure that out for ourselves. And did you do anything different musically on this one?
Musically, some of the newer songs are a little longer. By that, I mean over 3 minutes. Most of our songs are usually 2 minutes or less, or 2.5 minutes at most. And so the songs are a little more metalized. There's still no guitar solos on anything. There's no keyboards or different instruments, slide whistles, flutes. Bands put all kinds of stuff on there. I don't. That to me isn't the purest form of death metal. So it's still very pure. The songwriting went perfectly. It's just a fantastic example of where the band is especially with the talent that's in the band.
And now you have a video out off the new album as well, which I think fits the band perfectly. So tell us a little bit about that.
So, basically, kind of along the lines of the last question, the subject matter is basically about Satan and death. And the video came about, a friend of mine who passed away a while ago, Brian Pattison, his band, Anthropic, did a video with this stop-motion animation person, and he showed me the video, and I was like, oh, this is perfect. This is what I want for a Nunslaughter video. So I got in touch with the creator, and I gave him 3 songs and the lyrics to those songs. He ended up choosing Below the Cloven Hoof because of the imagery that was in the lyrics, and he felt he could recreate that on the screen. And I just told him kind of what I wanted. I wanted to see zombies and Satan and fire, and if possible, put some upside-down crosses in there. And I think he got it. I think he hit all the he hit all the marks in the video. But I let him just read the lyrics and do his craft and art, and that's the video that we got.
And that is very complex to do. Gives me a headache just thinking about it. And I think I actually interviewed Bill's band when they did that interview too, because I was talking about the same thing, that animation is so time consuming.
Yeah.
And it is very old school too, you know, it's been around a long time, but because it's so time consuming, of course, like with everybody else in the world, we're looking for faster, easier ways to do things, so it's kind of a lost art form. So when you guys have it on your album, you know, I thought it just fit perfectly, because you guys have been around a long time. This art form has been around a long time.
We're analog.
Right? And it just fit perfectly. So now, Don, in the past you've been very adamant about releasing your music on vinyl. Have you warmed up to CDs yet?
Definitely warmed up to CDs, and I've even somewhat warmed up to downloads. They're CDs are a great way to distribute the music quickly, and you don't have to keep a lot of care with a CD. It's a little more rough and tumble than a record and vinyl. But this record is actually, this album will be out on LP and cassette and CD as well. So, but yeah, I mean, I got hundreds of CDs myself, and I think we released probably about 20, maybe 23 CDs in this band. So must like them enough to keep releasing them.
So what is your vinyl collection like?
Well, actually, all my LPs, I sold off after Jim died. I sold my LP collection and used that money to move out west and become and go to school become a Harley Davidson mechanic. So I sold my LP collection, still have my 7 inches, still collecting 7 inches, but the LPs didn't make the trip out to Arizona.
So the U.S., like most of the world, is kind of ping-ponging with having bands play out again, but do you have some things lined up for this year?
Almost every weekend this summer we have at least 1, if not 2 shows set up. We don't have any tours. For the U.S., the pandemic, we weren't sure about trying to set up a tour and putting time and money into something that was going to end up maybe collapsing. So we don't have any tours set up this year. Next year we are planning on doing a U.S. tour with a band from Europe, Demonical.
Oh yeah.
And we're kind of working on that. Still a little premature, but we are working on that. And then that'll be in the U.S. and hopefully, if things go well with COVID and the pandemic, we'll also set up a European tour for next year.
And Don, in closing, you have fans that have been loyal to you and your music for decades. So what would you like to say to all of them?
I can't thank them enough. I've actually been to quite a few shows that they bring their kids to. Not little kids. They're not like 5 years old or anything, but they're actually teenagers. I had people that were listening to Nunslaughter when they were a young adult, and now they're bringing their sons and daughters to the show. And I think that that's a really neat thing to experience as a person in a band or a performer, that you're touching or reaching different generations over the course of the band's life, and that means a lot to me.
And well, there you guys have it. Nunslaughter have a new album out off of Hell's Headbangers Records called Red is the Color of Ripping Death. You can check out and maybe pick up a copy for yourself. And Don, thank you for taking the time to talk with us today, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, and it was nice to speak with you.